North and south poles are measured out to limit the extension of form from its wave axis to a sphere of balanced curvature. East-west polarity resists north-south extension of matter beyond the form of a sphere. Its office is to return the sphere to its wave axis. North-south polarity resists that change. In a radial universe of varying pressures, the change in pressures is only in the inward-outward direction. There are therefore only two directions of changing pressures in this universe. The inward one is the direction of multiplied pressures. Gravity means multiplied pressure. Gravity is north. North is positive. The outward one is the direction of divided pressures. Radiation means divided pressure. Radiation is south. South is negative. North-south in the direction of dynamic action. The piston of the universal heartbeat is north-south. Cyclones, tornadoes, lightning, rains, and all other dynamic effects of motion are north-south. Their potentials all multiply in the direction of north and divide in the direction of south. Solidity of matter is north. Emptiness of space is south. North-south represents the divided universe of pairs of equal opposite conditions. The condition which we call gravity and the condition which we call radiation. Briefly stated, north-south is the direction of motion and time, for sequences are north-south reversals which born time. Summary. East-west poles are measured intervals of extensions on planes of rest. They represent the undivided universe of unchanging balance and potential conditions. North-south poles are measured intervals of extensions on planes of motion. They represent the divided universe of changing balance and potential condition. North-south polarity divides the universe into two equal and opposite conditions by extending balance dually and dividing it into pairs. East-west polarity resists that division and sets up two counterbalancing east-west poles to control the balance of the two conditions on their return to the one condition of rest. Examples. A true sphere sun is in perfect balance. It has but one focal center of gravity because its radii are of equal length. The moment the sphere oblates, its radii are of unequal length. Their potentials vary because the equatorial extensions of mass outbalance the polar extensions. Two east-west balancing poles then extend from the center of gravity to control the unbalance of potential now set up in the sphere. A sector of the sun cut through upon the plane of its equator would be circular. No, I don't mean sector. A section of the sun cut through upon the plane of its equator would be circular. The radii of a circle are equal. A section cut through the poles would be elliptical. The radii of an ellipse are unequal. A sphere has but one focal center, but an ellipse has two. During the prolation of elliptical spheroids to spherical form, the two east-west foci draw closer to the center of gravity as north-south foci extend away from that center. As spheres oblate to elliptical spheroids, the east-west poles extend away from the center of gravity as depolarization draws the north-south poles closer together. The sun is practically a true sphere. Its equatorial ring of hundreds of millions of miles is a gyroscopic wheel. Its shape is circular at its equator, but its pressure directions are spiral. The planet Mercury is practically a true sphere. It is an equatorial extension of the sun. If it were still a part of the sun's body, it would revolve around the sun's axis as an integral part of the sun's body. Even though it has separated from it and has an axis of its own upon which it must turn, it must still revolve around the sun's body as well as its own. Mercury is also a gyroscopic wheel. Its ring extension coincides with the ring extension of the sun. They are on the same plane, therefore their poles of rotation are parallel. If the pressures of the ring were equipotential circles, Mercury would describe a circular orbit around the sun, but they are not. They are spiral, therefore they are perihelion and aphelion foci, which balance and control the extension and retraction of its orbit around the sun. This same thing is true of the 4 inner moons of Jupiter and the inner moons of Mars. Our Earth is not located upon the plane of the sun's gyroscopic ring. It has broken away from it to an angle of 23 degrees. Its gyroscopic disk is so greatly out of balance with that of the sun that it has to revolve around the sun below the sun's gyroscopic disk for 1/2 of the year and above it for the other half, instead of keeping on the same plane with it as Mercury does. That puts the Earth in the same predicament that the tightrope walker finds himself in when he leans out of balance with gravity, or a spinning top is when it leans off-center. The angle of their leanings is the same in principle as the leaning of the Earth's axis. It makes the Earth wobble on its axis to describe the circles around its plane of gravity, while it reaches out for 2 counterbalancing foci, just as the tightrope walker reaches for 2 counterbalancing foci. Science has been retarded in discovering this fact of counterbalance of polarity by misinterpreting the action of the tightrope walker, the interpretation being that the extension of a balancing pole is to counteract the weight of his unbalance by extending an equal weight upon the other side of his balancing equator. That is true, but the conception of weight is not true. By reading my chapter on weight, this will be clarified by the true conception of weight as the potential of resistance to strains and stresses set up by any departure from a balanced condition. When the Earth stood up straight, it had no need of extending its balance poles, but the moment it leaned, it needed those counterbalancing foci as much as the tightrope walker needed them. Wobbling gyroscopes seek balance. Mass is motion, and motion must be balanced by opposed pairs of poles. When motion ceases, polarity likewise ceases. Motion does not cease, however, until extended mass returns to the wave axis from which it was projected. The moment it again leaves that axis in opposite two-way extensions, poles appear because balance is divided and must be controlled. Tops spin on their pegs and solar and atomic gyroscopes spin on their hub shafts, but the principle of their wobbling is the same. They wobble when their shafts are off-center. The hubs of gyroscopic wheels do not center their rims in the first 3 pairs of tones of the octave. The wheels are ellipses, and the hub of the wave shaft is gravity, so gravity does not center the wheel for the first 3 octaves. A metal gyroscopic wheel, or flywheel, multiplies centrifugal force as it increases in speed. But nature's atomic gyroscopic wheels are centripetal vortices, which contract around their shafts. They are like whirlpools or cyclones, which thrust inward and multiply centripetal force as they thus contract to form hubs for their wheels, which are centering suns. Two children cannot move while they are in balance with their fulcrum, for motion is impossible in an equilibrium. Balance must be divided into unbalanced opposite pairs before motion becomes possible. Nature likewise cannot produce motion without thus dividing balance to produce two opposing conditions. Centripetal force thus produces carbon. When its speed has multiplied sufficiently in each succeeding tonal effort to find a balance between those two opposing conditions. Wobbling gradually decreases as the prolating spheroidal hub of the gyroscopic wheel contracts to a true sphere, and the shaft of gravity centers the hub, and its north-south poles are parallel with the wave axis of its beginning. How gravitation and radiation born each other. Nature works in strange ways. All of her mystifying processes, her manner of producing the double polarity, which assures two-way balance for the two-way journey of her two conditions, is perhaps the most elusive of her illusions. It is well to clarify this mystery step by step at this point. The carbon wheel spins true upon a horizontal shaft, which arose vertically from its plane of equilibrium. The rim of the wheel begins to spin on the horizontal plane of equilibrium and arises to become the vertical equator of its hub. The vertical has become horizontal, and the horizontal has become vertical, to transform one unchanging rest condition to two changing conditions of motion. The positive electric worker has made the rim of the wheel become its hub by use of its centripetal force. That is how nature manufactures gravity and multiplies potential to contract waves into solids surrounded by space. The negative electric worker has made the hub of the wheel become its rim by use of its centrifugal force. That is how nature manufactures radiation and divides potential to expand waves into space centered by solids. The rim of the wheel is now 90 degrees from the equilibrium plane of its birth, and is 90 degrees from the shaft of its hub. From a plane of no motion, it has become a sphere of maximum motion. The hub shaft of the wheel is now parallel with the plane of rest, and 90 degrees from the plane of maximum motion. The rim of the wheel was maximum speed, and the hub was minimum when motion began on the plane of rest. But now the hub is maximum speed, and rim is minimum when the wheel stands up from rest. This is nature's process of dividing the still light of the Creator into the two moving lights of matter and space to simulate the mind imagining of the Creator by moving image forms of His creation. A word picture of this process might simplify nature's method. Imagine, therefore, the seed of ideal placed upon the wave axis like the seed of a tree put into the ground. Now imagine the ground rising as a hoop would rise from the ground until it stood straight up instead of lying down. As the ground rises to stand up, imagine the ideal of the tree unfolding in a series of 4 efforts which we will call stages of growth. The seed of the ideal becomes a fully formed, mature body when the ground has arisen from wave axis level to wave amplitude height, 90 degrees from its axis level. The ground which borne the formless seed is now the vertical equator which balances the fully formed body. Half of the upright tree extends to the north and that equator, and the other half to the south of it. Its roots extend north toward gravity, and its branches radiate south toward space. This is the manner in which growing matter appears. Now comes the reverse process. That fully formed body which has unfolded from its seed must now refold into its seed. This it does in 4 reverse stages of decadence, and as it thus refolds, the ground lies down gradually with all of the body still contained in it but refolded as patterned seed. This is the manner in which decaying matter disappears. This visualization pictures that method of nature which borns and reborns its patterned ideals forever and forever without end. That which comes from the ground must return to it for rebirth. Patterned forms must disappear into their seed and be added to it at each rebirth.